What's up, Green Bay Packers fans? Welcome back, and as always, thank you for joining me. My name is Paul Brettel, the site editor over at Dairyland Express, where we cover the Packers, Brewers, Bucks, and Badgers. I also have a new article out every Monday and Friday over at Cheesehead TV. And as it says at the bottom of the screen, you can follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. So for today's episode, we're going to take a look at the current state, the current status of the 2022 Green Bay Packers roster. So this roster breakdown, as we go position by position, is not going to include any of the free agents, and it's anyone who is currently under contract for 2022. So we're just going to take a 30,000-foot view at each of the positions and see where this Green Bay Packers team stands. So let's start with quarterback. So currently the quarterbacks under roster are Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love, Kurt Benkert, and Danny Etling. Now on paper, looks like that room is set. But of course, we know that that's not the case. We're all sitting here waiting, and it should be sooner than later, as he told us, but waiting for Aaron Rodgers to decide whether he wants to retire. I don't see that being the case, or if he wants to head elsewhere, or if he's going to come back to the Green Bay Packers this season. If that's the case, do the Packers hang on to Jordan Love, or do they keep Jordan Love? If Aaron Rodgers goes elsewhere, Jordan Love is going to be the quarterback. Do they bring in a veteran backup just for some added stability? Does Kurt Benkert become quarterback too? This entire quarterback room is really in flux right now, and we aren't going to have any sort of idea what this room might look like come the beginning of the season until we know what the four-time MVP is going to do. Next up is running back, and this is probably the most stable position on the entire team right now. The current running backs under contract for 22 are Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, Kylan Hill, and Patrick Taylor. And in all likelihood, when we get to week one of the regular season, that's going to be your top four running backs. Patrick Taylor may be on the practice squad, but I imagine that these four are going to be Green Bay's core running backs this season. Now, they still have to fill out their 90-man roster. Kylan Hill is still recovering from that ACL injury, so they're probably going to bring in at least one, who knows, maybe two more running backs to get through training camp, to get through the preseason, but this group seems pretty well intact. Next up is wide receiver, where it's the opposite. There's a lot of unknowns. Currently under contract is Randall Cobb, Amari Rodgers, Juwan Winfrey, Chris Blair, and Rico Gafford. Winfrey and Blair were primarily practice squad players, although Winfrey did see some snaps last season, and Rico Gafford was signed in January to a futures deal. Now, the status of this position can change drastically as well, depending what happens with Devontae Adams, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, as well as Allen Lazard. MVS and Adams are both free agents. If Rodgers is back, it's difficult for me to imagine a world where Adams is not. Have to think that those two are tied. If Rodgers is here, so is Adams. If Rodgers is gone, I imagine Adams will be as well. Allen Lazard's a restricted free agent. If the Green Bay Packers choose to put a second-round tender on him, for example, that contract could fall. These have to be negotiated yet between the NFL and NFLPA. These are set figures. Lazard and the Packers aren't going to negotiate it. But that could fall in the $3.5–4 million range. I tend to think he's going to be back just because, I mean, when Cobb was out, Lazard looked like a bona fide number 2 receiver last year, not to mention what he brings to the run game as well as a blocker. MVS is another big question mark. But obviously, if one of those, two of those, I don't think all three are going to be back, but that can drastically change how this wide receiver room looks. Randall Cobb, what's going to happen with him? Talked about that in my last video. Again, he's someone else who could be tied to Rodgers. Whole reason he's a Green Bay Packer is because Aaron Rodgers wanted him here. If Rodgers is back, do the Green Bay Packers rework his deal? Do they restructure it? Do they cut him and then re-sign him at a cheaper number? What do the Green Bay Packers do with him? But either way, receiver is likely going to be a somewhat big need this offseason, even if Devontae Adams is back, just for that depth. And it's mock draft season. I am myself am guilty of putting those mock drafts out over at Dairyland Express. But in a lot of mock drafts that we've seen, of course, it's tradition. The Green Bay Packers are taking a receiver in round 1. But I have to think, if there is a year where it's going to happen, this one just might be it because of the sheer need that the Green Bay Packers have at that position. Next up, tight end. Currently under contracts, Mercedes Lewis, Tyler Davis, Alize Mack, and Josiah DeGuara. I would also, although technically not under contract, I think it's fairly safe to say that Dominic Daphne is going to be back. He's an exclusive rights free agent, which means he can't really negotiate with anyone else. And the Packers can, as long as they offer him a 1-year deal for the league minimum, he essentially has to take it. So I believe Dominic Daphne will be back. Mercedes Lewis, a bit of a question mark. Again, seems tied to Rodgers. If Rodgers is back, I could absolutely see Mercedes Lewis wanting to continue playing. If Rodgers decides to go elsewhere, maybe Lewis does as well. Maybe he retires. So something to uh, keep our eyes on in that regard. Or I shouldn't say Lewis does as well, head elsewhere, but maybe the Packers choose to cut him because he is still under contract. He doesn't have that. He can't simply make that decision on his own. But still, you get the idea. He's a question mark this season. In terms of blocking tight ends, assuming Daphne's back, Lewis, we all know, is exceptional. Tyler Davis, saw flashes. Josiah DeGora. Green Bay Packers are very well set in that regard. However, what this group is missing is a pass-catching option, a true pass-catching tight end. And this offense in general missed that element last year once Robert Tonyan went down, both in the red zone, over the middle, up the seam, and also just what Robert Tonyan creates for those around him with the attention that he draws. Whether it's Tonyan, who they bring back, and he is recovering from his ACL injury, very well could miss a portion of the upcoming season, or whether it's a different free agent or through the draft, a true pass-catching tight end, add that to the to-do list for Brian Gutekunst this offseason, because that offense definitely missed that element last year. The offensive line currently under contract is Bakhtiari, Jenkins, Myers, Runyon, Turner, Newman, Cole Van Lanen, and Michael Manet, who was signed to the practice squad late in the season, I believe late November, December, in that range. But in general, this group seems pretty well put together. Jenkins is recovering from his ACL injury. Hopefully we get him back at some point in the 2022 season. But you have Bakhtiari, you have Myers, you have Runyon, 3-year core starters. Royce Newman as well started the entire season up until week 18 at right guard. Billy Turner's the question mark here. I wrote an article over at Dairyland Express, and I imagine we'll discuss this in greater detail in an upcoming video, but he's someone who I don't know what they're going to do with him this season. There really isn't a route that the Packers can go with Billy Turner that I'm going to be surprised at. If 2022 is the final year of his deal, if they let him play out the current deal as is with a $9 million cap hit, I could see that happening. If they choose to cut him, I could see that happening. If they choose to restructure him, add some additional voided years in an effort just to try to reduce his cap space, I could absolutely see that as well. And I think this is probably the least likely of that bunch, but if they just chose to extend him, again, I'm not going to be surprised whatsoever. So that's a really difficult one to gauge, whether Turner come this summer is going to be a part of the team or not. And a lot of that hinges on how does Green Bay view Elton Jenkins' future as well as Yosh Nijman's. You'll notice Yosh wasn't listed here. He's an exclusive rights free agent as well, but I have to imagine that they're going to bring him back. But a lot of that hinges on what they do with Turner, on how they view those two. Is Jenkins, when he's healthy, going to be the right tackle of the future because you have Josh Myers, John Runyon, Royce Newman along the interior? Is Yosh Nijman, are they going to transition him to the right side? As far as we know, or at least what we've seen so far, he's only practiced at left tackle. And that's not, and I know it's an offensive tackle either way, but it's not as simple as, hey, Yosh, go line up on the right side now. There's definitely a lot more that goes into it. So are they going to start cross-training him at right tackle this summer as a way to, if they move on from Turner, have him take over there? Those are questions that we'll have to ultimately wait and see what the answers are. But depending how the Packers feel about Jenkins as well as Nijman at right tackle for the foreseeable future is going to play a huge role, I imagine, determining Turner's future. Also on top of that, we got to give credit to Brian Gutekunst, Packers management, Adam Stenovich, Matt LaFleur. The whole operation is tremendous at getting and developing offensive linemen, so they can build their depth. I'm confident, we can confidently say that there's a good opportunity to them to build the depth of this unit in the draft, just as they have the last couple seasons. So next up, we're going to the defensive side of the ball. So the interior defensive line: Kenny Clark, Dean Lowry, TJ Slayton, and Jack Heflin. That's it. Once again, the interior defensive line is a position that the Green Bay Packers should address this offseason. However, for the most part, I know fans have been clamoring for it for a while, get Kenny Clark some help. It's not exactly a position that they have addressed. TJ Slayton in the 5th round last year is really about it over the last couple seasons. So the real question mark here, they're obviously going to have to add to this group. They can't just go into the season with 4 players. But Dean Lowry, he falls very similarly for me into that Billy Turner category, where whatever option, whichever route the Green Bay Packers choose to go with him, I'm not going to be surprised. My guess, and because this group is just so thin right now, is that they're going to find a way to keep him. Maybe not an extension, maybe it's a restructure, but something, or maybe they let him play out his current deal. I think he has a $7-8 million cap hit this season, so not small, but it's not enormous either. But he's coming off his most productive season as a pass rusher, set a career high in sacks, career high in pressures. And with Dean Lowry, there's also the dirty work that he does, the stuff that goes unnoticed. He occupies space, eats up double teams, and his teammates know when he's out there. He helps create for his teammates. So he's not typically someone who's going to fill a stat sheet, although this past season he did do a good job of that. So the interior defensive line group, once again, seems to be kind of a tradition, is thin and is going to have to be addressed. Linebacker, speaking of thin, Ty Summers, Isaiah McDuffie, Ray Wilborn. That's it. Chris Barnes is an exclusive rights free agent. We've already covered exclusive rights free agents, so don't worry, he's going to be back. But the big question is, Devondre Campbell going to be back? He, of course, had an all-pro season. He's going to get paid this year. Is it going to be by the Green Bay Packers? We'll have to wait and see. But one interesting question I've asked, devote a whole article to this over at Cheesehead TV, is even if Campbell isn't back, has his play shifted how the Green Bay Packers view the linebacker position? We know it's not one that they typically emphasize, whether that's draft capital, whether that's free agent dollars. And ironically, they found Campbell by sticking with their same frugal process of, not spending in free agency. Got a 1-year deal for $2 million. So that's going to be interesting to watch, but this position absolutely has to be addressed. It's just going to be, as I mentioned, interesting to see how Green Bay goes about it. Do they break their mold of being cheap, frugal at the position, or do they roll with Chris Barnes and maybe a 4th round pick in addition to the players that they have? So, but linebacker is a massive need. Edge rusher, on paper, this looks pretty good. Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, Rashawn Gary, Jonathan Garvin, Tipa Nilai, and Ladarius Hamilton. But as we know, Preston Smith and Zadarius Smith's futures are up in the air. I feel safe to say, obviously with the Packers, we never know because they always surprise us, but it feels safe to say, especially after Zadarius Smith's post on Instagram following the Niners game, seemed very much like a goodbye, that the Packers are going to move on from him. And if doing so, they can save over $15 million in cap space. Preston Smith, kind of definitely more of a question mark in that regard. Definitely see a path where he's gone, but I tend to lean towards, and I mentioned this in the last video when we talked about Preston Smith, I do think he's going to be back. While the Packers can save, I think, about $12.5 million in cap space by releasing him, if they bring him back, keep him, and extend him, they can save in the $7 to $8 million range in cap space. So as I said in the last video, I'd rather have Preston Smith and save $7 million than get rid of Preston Smith and save $12 million. Because if both Smiths are gone, Gary, Garvin, Hamilton, Tipa, Gary is phenomenal, but he's going to need much, much more help. And to me, edge rusher becomes, without a doubt, of all the positions, priority number one if the both Smiths are gone. Even if one of the Smiths are back, I still think it should be a fairly high priority, given that even last season, as good as Preston and Gary were, as well as the entire pass rush unit, the depth of the edge rusher position was a concern throughout the entire year. There was a very, very noticeable difference when Gary and Smith weren't on the field. So this is a position where they could absolutely use more depth, especially given the importance of it. It's a premier position in this game. All right, 3 positions to go. Cornerback. At the top end, the Green Bay Packers are set up very well. Jay Alexander, Eric Stokes. We'll see what happens with Rasul Douglas. He is a free agent. But Shamar John Charles, KB Nento, and Keandre Thomas make up the last 3 spots. Obviously, they are lacking some serious depth here. Wouldn't be surprised to see them, depending on what kind of cap space they have, try to address the position in free agency. Chandon Sullivan could be someone that they look to re-sign. He's a free agent as well. He held up well in the slot last season by several of Pro Football Focus's metrics, where it just measures slot cornerbacks. He was top 10 in a number of them. So held up well in that position. But this is a position that absolutely needs more depth moving forward, because as good as Jair and Stokes are, again, we saw the importance of cornerback depth this past season. Safety, have Adrian Amos, have Darnell Savage, but again, a sneaky need. Henry Black's an exclusive rights free agent. expect him to be back. I expect all the exclusive rights free agents to be back. There are 8 of them. But as the primary third down, or excuse me, as the primary third safety this past season, he definitely had his ups and downs, struggled particularly in coverage and behind. And then in addition to Savage and Amos, there is Vernon Scott, Innis Gaines, and Sean Davis. And if we look ahead to 2023, this is 2022's Amos last season. Are they going to cut him? I think that's a very unlikely option, but a possibility. Again, we don't know. They could extend him, could restructure him, but we don't know if Amos is going to be on the team in 2023. Darnell Savage, this is the last year of his rookie deal. He has a 5th-year option for 2023 that the Packers can pick up, but are they? His play has been very, very inconsistent. Andy Herman of Packer Report, who goes through and grades every single play for every Green Bay Packers player over the course of the season, had Darnell Savage as his second worst graded defender this past year. So looking ahead a year from now, there's a very realistic situation where the Packers don't have Amos and don't have Savage at the safety position. So regardless of what the room looks like this year, and those two are back, they need to start preparing for what this room could look like in the future. Lastly, the specialists: Mason Crosby, J.J. Molson, and Steven Wirtle. Corey Bojorquez is a free agent. We'll see if Green Bay tries to bring him back. Steven Wirtle, long snapper. Green Bay, at least at the bare minimum, needs to bring in some competition for him this summer. Mason Crosby and J.J. Molson. I tend to think that Mason Crosby has played his final snaps as a Green Bay Packer. Again, I detailed this more in a specific article devoted to him and this discussion, but he really struggled last year. And I know, I mentioned this as well, I know it certainly wasn't all on him. The blocking of that field goal unit was very, very rough at times, but still missed 9 field goals, struggled from 40 plus. In addition to that, on kickoffs, Crosby's just not getting the ball through the end zone like he once did. He's going to turn 38 this upcoming season. And for a Green Bay Packers kick coverage unit that was, well, as bad as they were, having a kicker to kick the ball through the end zone to limit return opportunities would have been very helpful. In addition to all that, J.J. Molson's been on the practice squad since the 2020 season. He's been on that group for about a year and a half now. There's something there that the Packers like, and given their cap situation, I believe they can save $2.5–3 million by moving on from Crosby. I tend to think they're going to explore that option. So there you have it, friends. That's a overview, quick look at the current status of the Green Bay Packers roster as we go position by position. As always, this is in article form over at Dairyland Express, where you can find all of my work, as well as at Cheesehead TV. Follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. Please like this video, hit subscribe. I greatly appreciate it. Well, until next time, friends, take care, stay safe, and as always, go Pack, go.